We are currently reading the Twits, and I am reading a couple of chapters per day. So far, we have met Mr. and Mrs. Twit. If you haven't seen the previous videos, go back and watch them because we're a bit of the way through the story now, so you need to make sure you're up to date on what's happened. But I will do a quick recap of yesterday's chapters just for everybody who's watched them. So we know that Mr. Twit has decided to play a huge prank on Mrs. Twit by making her think that she's got the shrinks. And this is pretty self-explanatory in that Mrs. Twit thinks in 11 days she will be shrunk to non-existent. She will not exist because she's shrunk so much that she's just not there anymore. And he has done this by adding little tiny bits of wood to her walking stick gradually over time so that slowly it's got bigger than her. And she has been persuaded into the fact that she's the one that's shrinking. He's also added wood to her stool to make her think that when she sits on it, she can no longer touch the floor. So there you go, she must be shrinking. Now obviously we know she's not shrinking, but we've got to let Mrs. Twit find that out for herself, I think. So, chapter 10, Mrs. Twit gets a stretching. Mr. Twit led Mrs. Twit outdoors where he had everything ready for the great stretching. He had 100 balloons and lots of string. He had a gas cylinder for filling the balloons. He had fixed an iron ring into the ground. "Stand here," he said, pointing to the iron ring. He then tied Mrs. Twit's ankles to the iron ring. When that was done, he began filling the balloons with gas. Each balloon was on a long string, and when it was filled with gas, it pulled on its string, trying to go up and up. Mr. Twit tied the ends of the strings to the top half of Mrs. Twit's body. Some he tied round her neck, some under her arms, some to her wrists, and some even to her hair. Soon there were 50 coloured balloons floating in the air above Mrs. Twit's head. "Can you feel them stretching you?" asked Mr. Twit. I can, cried Mrs. Twit. "They're stretching me like mad." He put on another 10 balloons. The upward pull became very strong. Mrs. Twit was quite helpless now. With her feet tied to the ground and her arms pulled upwards by the balloons, she was unable to move. She was a prisoner, and Mr. Twit had intended to go away and leave her like that for a couple of days and nights to teach her a lesson. In fact, he was just about to leave when Mrs. Twit opened her big mouth and said something silly. "Are you sure my feet are tied properly to the ground?" she gasped. "If those strings around my ankles break, it'll be goodbye for me." And that's what gave Mr. Twit his second nasty idea. Chapter 11. Mrs. Twit goes ballooning up. "There's enough pull here to take me to the moon," Mrs. Twit cried out. "To take you to the moon?" exclaimed Mr. Twit. "What a ghastly thought! We wouldn't want anything like that to happen. Oh dear me, no." "We most certainly wouldn't," cried Mrs. Twit. "Put some more string around my ankles quickly. I want to feel absolutely safe." "Very well, my angel," said Mr. Twit, and with a ghoulish grin on his lips, he knelt down at her feet. He took a knife from his pocket, and with one quick slash, he cut through the strings holding Mrs. Twit's ankles to the iron ring. She went up like a rocket. "Help!" she screamed. "Save me!" But there was no saving her now. In a few seconds, she was high up in the blue sky and climbing fast. Mr. Twit stood below, looking up. "What a pretty sight," he said to himself. "How lovely all those balloons look in the sky, and what a marvellous bit of luck for me. At last the old hag is lost and gone forever." Chapter 12. Mrs. Twit comes ballooning down. Mrs. Twit may have been ugly, and she may have been beastly, but she was not stupid. High up there in the sky, she had a bright idea. "If I can get rid of some of these balloons," she said to herself, "I will stop going up and start to come down." She began biting through the strings that held the balloons to her wrists and arms and neck and hair. Each time she bit through a string and let the balloon float away, the upward pull got less and her rate of climb slowed down. When she had bitten through 20 strings, she stopped going up altogether. She stayed still in the air. She bit through one more string. Very, very slowly, she began to float downwards. It was a calm day. There was no wind at all. And because of this, Mrs. Twit had gone absolutely straight up. She now began to come absolutely straight down. As she floated gently down, Mrs. Twit's petticoat billowed out like a parachute, showing her long knickers. It was a grand sight on a glorious day, and thousands of birds came flying in from miles around to stare at this extraordinary old woman in the sky. Oh, that's chapter 13. Well, that was a very quick 3 chapters. Well, she's not stupid, so she managed to cut herself down. So I reckon that Mr. Twit is not going to be too pleased when he realises that she's managed to get back down to the ground again. But that's for tomorrow. So I shall see you tomorrow for the next 3 chapters of the Twits. Take care. See you soon.